How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard. This is a show about wrestling, and this week we are going to be talking WWF Radio. And a lot of you out there probably don't know what that is or don't remember it. People our age might remember it, but we are going to be discussing WWF Radio. We're going to go over the history of it here, and we're also going to be reviewing and recapping an episode, and seemingly the only full episode that is available online. We're going to be talking about that. So, Leonard, before we get started on the history of WWF Radio, did you listen to it or in any way know of it while you were younger?
No. So I had sent you the episode that popped up on YouTube that I listened to. And when I first saw it, I thought it was somehow related to Livewire, which was a live television call-in program that they had during the Attitude Era. Eventually became kind of a recap show. I thought it had something to do with that. And then I started listening to it and realized it was something similar, but way different.
Right.
And so, no, I had no idea that this existed. And when I listened to it, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it is very different and unique for WWF for the time period. And that's why I thought it would be interesting to talk about. But no, I had no idea this existed. And I'm sure as you'll get into with the history of it, a lot of other people probably didn't either because it wasn't around very long.
No, it wasn't. And, I heard about it through one of the other parts of it that they tried to utilize, which is, and this era of WWF, I wasn't watching. This was definitely a period of pro wrestling that I wasn't really caring about that at all. I was into other things at the time. But rewatching some of the events from this period, they do mention the alternate commentary on a few of the events from this short period. And that was one of the things they utilized this for as well. We'll get there. But in any event, so yes, and listening to Grilling JR, he's talked about how he first, met Vince McMahon, went to a show, and one of his first pitches was that they should explore, radio more. And that was kind of one of the first conversations they had so.
And I know from reading Jim Ross's second book, which we did an episode on, is that he started out in radio and he did a radio show talking about Mid-South. It maybe was even Mid-South that time, but wrestling. He had like an hour show or half-hour show talking about wrestling. And to mention about the alternative commentary, when I was reading about that kind of reminded me of the people who I've heard of who will watch a baseball game on television, but will turn off the sound and listen to the radio because they like that broadcast better.
I get that in a weird way. I get that, because we could go off on a tangent on modern day commentators and their strengths and weaknesses in any sport or area of entertainment. But radio baseball commentators are very good. A lot of them are very good.
Because they have to describe the game more visually.
Yes, absolutely. So, but yes, this Radio WWF was a short-lived syndicated talk and pay-per-view accompaniment. It was pitched by Jim Ross, as I said, launched by the WWF in the summer of 1993. It was their early experimenting into terrestrial radio, trying to expand the company's footprints. It was the weekly syndicated portion featured Jim Ross and Johnny Polo. Leonard, tell the listeners who Johnny Polo is.
Sky Flamingo.
Yeah.
And also Raven. Later became Raven.
Yes, absolutely. They would take live fan phone calls and they would interview WWF superstars. The insider approach to this was that, unlike standard kayfabe WWF television at the time, the radio program provided a rare behind-the-scenes look at the wrestling business. Ross and Polo would, discuss rival companies like the WCW. And apparently in one episode, I would love for this to be the other one that is unearthed. They talk about the infamous fight between Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious involving hotel room and scissors. The fact that was discussed on any WWF programming is unreal to me, but
Right.
apparently that happened. They obviously had some interesting guest moments. We'll talk about that on the episode that we are reviewing.
Which is, I think, the most famous guest moment that they
Yeah,
had.
absolutely. And of course, as I said, another unique part of it was the alternative audio broadcasts during the company's pay-per-view events. It was audio only, but it would target fans who could not or did not buy the television pay-per-views, which I actually think is a cool thing.
And I believe those are done by Jim Ross and Gorilla Monsoon, who would be, I believe, perfect for that.
Yes, absolutely. And it was also, I guess, tailored for overseas military personnel on the Armed Forces Radio Network. And yeah, because they couldn't see the action, Ross and Gorilla Monsoon delivered the more descriptive rapid fire commentary. They would do this for SummerSlam 93, Survivor Series 93, and the 1994 Royal Rumble. We'll get to the end of WWF Radio after we review our episode, Leonard. But Leonard, I'm going to flip it to you. You can take us into the episode that is available that we both listened to.
Sure, it is. I did not write down the date, but it's right before Survivor Series 1993
Yep.
is where this is coming from. So I meant to write down the date and didn't. It's a 2-hour program, but what's on YouTube is doesn't include the local radio commercials, but it does include, which I thought was interesting, WWF house ads for the WrestleMania album, the WWF magazine, the fan club, the action figures, and of course for the upcoming Survivor Series. So those were just fun to hear in and of themselves. As you mentioned, the hosts here are Jim Ross and Johnny Polo, and I want to ask you something here too. Jim Ross is very snarky throughout, and this is a couple years before he would be the heel JR character, but this is very much how it sounds. And he's just not cutting down Johnny Polo. He's cutting down Jack Tunney, and he's, really pushing Randy Savage, which we'll get to when he comes on. So what was your thoughts on how Jim Ross was being?
This is early JR. And this was before, and we'll get to this because it's a part of why the show went away. This was before his first bout of Bell's palsy. Mm-hmm. And so this era of JR was on fucking point. Like, he was sharp, he was quick-witted, and obviously this was his baby, so he was talking about everything. And if you listen to his commentary, even when he was doing the triple booth with Vince and the King at this time, like, he was filled with much more acerbic humor during that time, because he was like the odd man out. Like, he was a play-by-play guy who was basically taking a back seat to Vince and the King, so he would just kind of say these smarmy things, and he obviously did that here, and so it is really like, I mean, gosh, obviously health issues and time have changed JR for obvious reasons, but it was interesting to listen to this. I did find the Jack Tunney comments very interesting, and obviously they don't outright say it, but like, they talk about Vince, basically talking about him in kind of the role that he was in behind the scenes before that became commonplace. So
they hint at a lot of stuff. I mean, it's really kind of towing the line of kayfabe and going a little to the left and a little to the right here and there as they go. But the first segment is with the Big Boss Man. This is a phone call because he is off in Japan wrestling for Giant Baba in old Japan. And again, that's something they would never mention on regular WWF TV. That the
Misawa and Kobashi are mentioned during a WWF radio broadcast.
Yes, that's correct as well. They also mention how the Boss Man had a feud with Jacques Rougeau, who's part of the Quebecers, which Johnny Polo was managing, back when he was the Mountie. And again, they never mentioned previous gimmicks. Right. So they never would mention that Jacques Rougeau used to be the Mountie. So that's mentioned on here. It's also mentioned that Boss Man was going to be coming back to the WWF in December of that year, or I think it said a couple months or whatever, and then he was talking to Jack Tunney about being a referee and how he had training as a referee. So I looked this up, and actually in December of the year he did come back, and he was a special guest referee for 3 house show main events between Bret Hart and Jeff Jarrett. So
Okay.
whether that was going to lead to something, I don't know, but his contract expired. He went to WCW after that. So
Yeah,
this was basically the Boss Man kind of talking about him coming back, what he was going to be doing, and about his time in Japan.
you could tell that. I mean, it sounded like he just got up.
Yeah.
It did not sound like the Big Boss Man. For those who remember his promos, which were fiery and his voice was, robust and all that, like this was a boss man who was like, damn it, I got to do this thing. And so, but yeah, that was a cool opening segment to hear.
Yeah. So then we get some audio segments. The first is with Adam Bomb, and this is from Raw, and it's Harvey Whippleman acquiring Adam Bomb from Johnny Polo. It said that Polo wanted to focus on the Quebecers as the WWF Tag Team Champions, and Ross gives him some crap about trading his guy Adam Bomb. A phone call is taken asking about when the Quebecers will face the Steiner brothers. Polo blows that off. We get a call asking about Savage versus Crush at Survivor Series. That's possible. Next call guy says Crush needs to prove himself and will probably pound Savage if things don't work out between them. And we're going to get to more on that later. And then we get audio of a match between the Rock and Roll Express and Well Done, which was a barn burner, with the Headley Bodies and Jim Cornette interfering. So again, some raw audio from the television. I don't think that necessarily played the greatest.
No, and yeah, I'll save my general thoughts towards the end, but like this was kind of the negative about listening to this, and it was that they would have basically just this recap segment or something that was just kind of playing to what you would see on television. It was only kind of reaffirming what you saw, or an interview where the guy was in character, and then they would shift to something that was just totally out of left field, and not anything you'd ever expect to hear. So it's just like very much like a kind of jarring shifts, I guess, in tone.
Yeah. So then we get some brief segment on comments concerning the previous episode with Bret Hart. So Jim Ross name drops Mike Weber in public relations at WCW and how there are some hard feelings from down south after comments Bret Hart made the week before concerning Ric Flair. Flair had lost the WWF title to Bret Hart in 1992 and then left in early 93 to go back to WCW. Again, you would never hear him reference WCW or a guy like Flair who was there and left on TV. So JR also says how some of the best matches he's ever called was Ric Flair matches, and giving some props to WCW, and said that they would be welcome to any WCW talent that would want to come on the show. And imagine if someone like Ric Flair or Sting would have done a phone call with these guys.
I mean, there's some guys that, Sting probably would have been professional, but like if you gave Ric Flair a live mic on a WWF programming when he wasn't working there, or I can't think of off the top of my head some of the other guys down there, but like who knows what would have been.
Yeah, in 93, I think they would had a whole lot of Bulldog. I think was there in 90. He left after. Was he? No, he was there because he went there. He was there in 92, 93 because he was back by SummerSlam. I don't know. Doesn't matter. No, he was there for SummerSlam 92. I think Bulldog was there. Doesn't matter. So anyway, now we get to the meat of the episode, and that's the Randy Savage interview, which is in about 3 different parts. So we'll talk about part by part. So the first one is him setting up the situation with Crush. And he came off as very real here, and I think more in-depth and subtle in characterization than he's ever done on television.
Yeah.
So basically, Savage has been a mentor and a friend to Crush. He encouraged Crush to go after Yokozuna on the WWF World Heavyweight title. And Crush gets injured in the match. He blames Savage for this. Crush is back home recovering in Hawaii. He won't talk to Savage. His family won't talk to Savage. And Savage and Crush are going to have what they call a summit. Take a drink every time they say summit.
I know, for real.
On Raw to kind of go over what's happening between them. And of course, as we know, that would lead to a match between the two at WrestleMania 10.
Right.
So this was some long-term planning going on for them. And before the break, Savage kind of teases how he's only been portrayed by one other time by one other person, and he can't talk about that. And JR is like, yes, you can. And so that's part 2. But part 1 your thoughts on Savage and what he said concerning the Crush situation.
I mean, yeah, at this point, Savage was playing the role of the veteran, eagerly pushing somebody, and he was obviously close with Crush, and was, I guess, more than willing to be in a program with him. Um, it's not one of Savage's fondly remembered feuds.
No, I think it had potential. I mean, this was more in-depth analysis of that than I had ever heard or knew
Yeah,
about.
because I'll be honest with you, Leonard. I do not. I mean, obviously, I didn't watch it live, but like, I do not remember that there was a summit.
No.
I didn't realize this was. I knew it was long-term planning because that's what they did then,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize that it was this far out. But yeah, I mean, this was Savage, playing the Macho Man persona way down,
Mhm.
and would continue to do that. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Like, they were clearly pushing this as like a high-profile feud to look forward to, though, because they talked about it pretty much the entire episode.
Yeah. Yeah. And then part two is stuff that I had not ever heard before until the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Vice.
Really?
Yeah, I had never heard about any of this until Vice. I mean, I knew that Savage and Hogan had like a kind of a falling out. I knew that Elizabeth was involved. I knew some of the vague elements of it, but not these specifics. And the fact that Savage is saying this, he outs himself. He calls himself Randy Poffo. He refers to Hulk Hogan as Terry Bollea, gives his real name. He outs Hulk Hogan for being a steroid abuser.
Yep.
Calls him a liar from the Arsenio Hall appearance, which I remember. I watched that
Right.
as a kid.
Yep.
I specifically remember watching that and him talking about how he had used steroids a couple times under the prescription of a doctor to heal muscle tears. And Savage calls him a liar. He admits to having done steroids and all the other guys, but we don't do them anymore because now they're illegal. They were illegal before. That is probably a lie. I mean, this was after the steroid trials. They had backed off a lot.
Yeah,
But
this era they were being very careful. So
more careful with it, yeah, than they have been. And then he talks about how he was on the road, and he mentions Linda Hogan. This is probably the first time Linda Hogan was ever mentioned on anything, I would presume. And how she got in Elizabeth's ear and drove a wedge between them, leading to their divorce. And this definitely comes off as a work shoot. I mean, Savage is kind of staying in character and he's talking within storylines, but at the same time, he seems to be going over his real feelings and some real life elements, particularly where Hogan and Linda was involved. So he, as I said, he uses their real names. And this was just something that was really shocking to me to hear on, an official WWF program, and the fact that Savage is making some pretty scandalous accusations that we would learn eventually were true, pretty much from all sides would admit to that eventually. But yeah, this was the main thing when I was listening to it that kind of made me stop because I was working on stuff and went, huh? Is he talking about what he's talking about? And maybe want to send it to you and maybe want to talk about this. So, I mean, your thoughts on this part here?
Yep. So I had known about this. So this was mentioned. The first time this was mentioned was on the first documentary that WWE did with Hogan. I think it was called the Hulk. I think it was the set was called Hulk Still Rules. It's behind me here somewhere.
Okay, I think I may have had that, but I don't know if I remember that part of it. I know I had one of the Hulk Hogan box sets.
Yeah, and like it's obviously that's just Hogan's side of it. This was the first time I had ever heard Savage's side because, as we know, Savage was not featured in even his own DVD box set that WWE would eventually put out. He had a falling out with the company all the way up until before he died, when he made like a brief appearance for like promoting a game for them.
Yeah, it was that really cartoony.
Yeah, but
game,
that's it. So we never got Savage's side, but Hogan refers to this situation pretty much exactly as you hear it here. And, in Savage's case, obviously he felt betrayed, and the steroid thing. Yes, Hogan admitted to that. Anybody who's watched the recent Netflix documentary, he talks about it there as well, and has regrets. about that part of it. But in terms of the Savage part, Hogan's side of it was that, he was like, Savage was just kind of, crazy at the time, about Elizabeth. And the other part of it is they eventually made amends. Obviously, they would have another falling out later on, but they made amends when Savage went to WCW and, apparently buried the hatchet on this particular situation. But it was interesting to hear Savage's side of it. And, let me just say this regarding if you're friends with a couple who is, splitting up or getting divorced, you are in a lose-lose situation. And, I'll say this. I have been in a similar situation with friends, and it's like, it sucks all around. You take sides. You tell people certain things. You don't tell other people certain things. I'm not defending Hogan. I wasn't there. I wasn't involved, but it was interesting to hear Savage's side of it because he was obviously very hurt, and it just goes to show you that there's two sides of every story. But I mean, I think this had to be, Leonard, where all these rumors about Savage and Hogan not liking each other in real life and all the like marital drama, like this had to be where all that kind of stuff started, because some people checked out WWF radio, but not a lot, as we know. And like eventually these rumors and gossip would kind of permeate the public, but like nobody really had it confirmed like we do now with internet, and it's interesting to see kind of where the seeds of everybody's real life drama, where it kind of started.
Yeah. So, and then we go to part 3, which is Savage taking phone calls, and we find out that his biggest fans are old ladies and young children.
The callers on this, Leonard, I mean,
they're insane.
If I was this age and I was watching it, if I was a young kid, I should say, and I was watching it, and I had the opportunity to call in, I'm sure I would have tried, and I'm sure my question would have been dumb too, but like, oh man.
Well, what's funny to me is like there's a lady named Connie who admits to being partially blind, and then there's Angie who says she's all the way blind. So I mean, blind people would listen to the radio more, I would guess, right?
And they're apparently just going to stay on hold all day, as Jim Ross even mentions it a bunch of times.
Yeah, these people are on hold. And then my favorite is, do I have this lady's hand? Oh, it's Angie, I think, is the one who says that the whole, like her theory, like I see her like that Charlie Day meme of like, with the ropes on the map, figuring it all out, that the crux of the Savage Crush situation is Doink the Clown, and how Doink beat Crush at WrestleMania 10 or WrestleMania 9, I'm sorry, but Savage and the Macho Midget beat Doink and Dink. So Savage beat Doink where Crush couldn't, and therefore Crush is jealous of Randy Savage.
Yeah, the Charlie Day reference is absolutely appropriate to that.
Yes. And then as he talks to a couple kids, Gavin is one who asks about Survivor Series. Andy says Johnny Polo is the best. I think this could be called early trolling. And a few other calls are just people who said they're happy to talk to Randy and support him and all that. So, as you said, crazy. So we move on, and the next segment is Razor Ramon on the phone. Basically, he and Polo snipe at each other, and then we get audio from Martel and Ramon fighting for the IC title, which was vacant after Shawn Michaels was injured. And I do remember, I think that's a good trivia question, that Martel was who Ramon beat. And they both were the last two men of a battle royal, and then they had a match the following week. And
I wouldn't have remembered that.
No, I think I had ran across that a couple of times. We had done some other stuff about WrestleMania 10 and Ramon and things, but of course this would all lead to the ladder match WrestleMania 10. And who the real IC champion was. Ramon comes off as a real tweener here. Says he'll take on all comers because he's a champion. He makes more money, and it doesn't matter who he faces. He also says wrestling fans should run the business. Diane asks about the 1, 2, 3 Kid and Razor Wrestling, RS and DiBiase. Nicole, another caller, asks who Ramon would like to wrestle, and he wants, of course, Shawn Michaels. They talk about Jim Ross. Oh no, this is the next segment. But yeah, so Ramon is basically getting over the feud with him and Sean comes on in a little bit.
Basically, just long-term storytelling.
Yeah, not as scandalous or as groundbreaking as the previous as Savage and Boss Man was. And then they mentioned JR's wedding, which is something they wouldn't do on TV. He had just got married on Tuesday, and he takes a dig on Ted Turner because he's trying to get his pension from WCW.
Yeah.
And Johnny Polo talks about bringing on Amy Fisher and how he's dating Amy Fisher, which of course is a
very, very random.
Deep reference for a lot of people who probably not understand that. Amy Fisher was dating a guy named Joey Buttafuoco, ended up shooting his wife in the face, and she was underage at the time. And there was like 5 movies, and like I know Alyssa Milano was I think one. I think Drew Barrymore was another. But anyway, and then we get audio of Jeff Jarrett's debut, which is just one of his vignettes being played the audio of. So then we get to the Shawn Michaels call. So it's very similar to Ramon. Michaels claims he's still the IC champ because nobody beat him despite the problems he's having with the WWF. And while he's stripped of the belt, he never returned it physically. So he still has the physical belt. Michaels teases going everywhere from WCW to Japan to the Indies. You know, I don't know. Imagine if what in 1993, where could Global? Go home to Texas, go to Global. I think Global was still running shows at that time. He wants to defend the belt in WWF, though. And we get audio of Jack Tunney suspending Michaels and vacating the title due to Michaels' no-showing. One caller supports Michaels. Another guy sounds in tears over the Rockers breaking up, which I loved. So, again, something similar. It's just him putting over the storyline and putting over the feud with him and Ramon.
Yeah, pretty much. It's interesting to hear him mention other companies, and like Jim Ross was kind of like asking him where he might go. But again, I think that's the type of stuff that Vince probably didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Shawn Michaels showed up in 1993 with the IC belt
in WCW.
In WCW, I don't even know. You know what though? It would be. He probably would have wound up wrestling dudes like Bobby Eaton and Steve Austin.
You know what, Leonard? I'm going to tell you right now, Shawn Michaels versus a prime Bobby Eaton would be off the chain.
That would be a great match. See, I wonder if he would join the Dangerous Alliance, or I would want Shawn against the Dangerous Alliance because I want to see him against Anderson, Zbyszko, Austin, Eaton. I want to see him wrestle all those guys.
That would be great. Yeah. So yeah, was that the last segment?
That was the last segment, and of course, we skipped over some of the filler and some of the commercials and things like that. But that was the last main segment, was them talking.
Yeah, we heard the WWF album ad a lot of times. I had that song in my head for a while.
That was what I think. That was every other. Like there was one for the action figures and like one for the magazine, but every other one was for the album. So they were really pushing the album.
All right, so let's talk about the cancellation and legacy of it here. It fell apart due to external and internal issues. Poor syndication. The WWF, as we know, did not promote this like hardly at all. And so that resulted in like few radio stations agreeing to carry it. So Jim Ross talks about some of those in the episode we listened to.
Yeah, he does mention some of the new ones they had just signed on, and it kind of made me wonder how many. I don't know if I saw that in what I had looked up. Did you see a number of how many they had like at their peak?
No, that's a good question.
Yeah, I would not imagine a lot, and I imagine most are probably on the East Coast.
Yeah. Another thing that happened was Jim Ross, left. Well, he got fired by the WWF, and he had suffered his first bout of Bell's palsy in early '94, and so he would leave the program and then get fired. And he was replaced briefly by Vince McMahon, taking over hosting duties.
And apparently they screened the calls at that point, which, yeah, I could see Vince dealing with some of these idiots that called in. I would be interested to hear a Vince version to see if he went as non-kayfabe and if he turned into early Mr. McMahon, because he was doing early Mr. McMahon at this point on the USWA. stuff, the promos he was doing down
That's
there.
true. That's true.
So it would be interesting if he turned on the snark like Jim Ross did.
That's true. Yeah, I would be curious to hear that also. So it was briefly, so it was canceled then after Vince took over because the lack of stations picking it up was.
Yeah, and because a lot of this is lost media, I don't think we know exact dates of the start and stop. I don't think they made it to WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It was briefly revived in the late 90s as an Armed Forces Network show hosted by Michael Cole and Mick Foley before being quietly discontinued again. So, yeah, as we know, this was pioneered by Jim Ross, and it was kind of a, this article I found kind of said it was kind of a precursor to WWE's Confidential series in 2002, in that it was a behind the scenes concept. And the unfortunate part of it is that WWF never archived this in any official way. So you really have to do some digging to find any clips, or like I said, the full episode we reviewed is to my knowledge the only one that's out there. Although I did find another link, Leonard. I can send this to you, where the first two matches of one of the pay-per-views.
Royal Rumble 94, I believe it was. I did not listen to that, but I saw that.
Yeah, I was
So
going to
the
listen.
only hope that we have, and I would like to know where the full episode came from, is if some station would have recorded the feed that they were getting and then still have it somewhere, which is
Yeah.
probably going to be very, because I doubt anyone recorded this off the radio.
Well,
And the fact that this does not include local commercials, but the house ads, would make me think that this came from some sort of master tape.
yeah, I think that I don't know if this was this or something else, but I think Jim Ross said on Grilling JR that he had a lot of these tapes. And I think this was years ago, but like Conrad Thompson, who hosts it, like offered to go through it for him and like kind of archive it properly. I don't know if it was all this or not, but it would be interesting to see if JR has any of that stuff.
Yeah, as mentioned, I know he did an old radio show back before he even started as a commentator with Mid South. So it could be that, it could be this, it could be both. But any of that, I mean, when we talk about wrestling history, I'm all about preserving it. And I'm not the biggest fan of Conrad Thompson. A lot of his quirks drive me nuts. But I do admit that he does have a heart for preserving wrestling history, and kudos to him on putting himself in a position where he can have access to these guys and access to certain memorabilia and certain things. And if anyone would want to preserve something like this, he would be. And I hate to say it too, but Brian Last, who works with Jim Cornette, is another guy who has a very big collection of things. There's a few of those podcast hosts out there like them, co-hosts who would really want to do something like that. And if Ross has anything, I hope he does let Conrad have access to.
Well, as I say that, I was looking at some of the rest of the notes that I took here, and I think if you subscribe to like the Patreon of ad-free shows, which is that Conrad Thompson kind of network, I guess they occasionally drop studio sessions with Jim Ross, which is like, I think, segments from his radio past in general. So I don't know if it's all from WWF radio or for some other radio stuff that Jim Ross did. But the people who subscribe to that, I used to be like, full in on all those podcasts, and I don't listen to a single one of them now. For various reasons, whether it be too many ads or just I think people run out of stuff to talk about. Eric Bischoff only talks about how much he hates AEW, and it is just like, it's stupid to me.
I'm listening to more podcasts now because I have a car where I can hook my phone to it via Wi-Fi and listen to that. So I did listen to a few of the recent Tony Schiavone podcasts. One where he has, who's the girl in AEW with the puppet?
Harley Cameron.
Yes, and she was actually very funny and very warm. I enjoyed her. Yeah. And then I listened to one with the Outrunners, who are the dumbest human beings I've ever listened to.
They're fun. I don't know who.
Well, here's the thing. It goes back to our hood slam thing, where it's like you have to dial into their stupidness.
Yeah,
And you've got Tony Schiavone talking about how they used to wrestle the Mulkey brothers in '86, and it just makes Tony Schiavone seem like a dumbass.
yeah,
It's not funny. And you see, as you know, that it's making I sound mad talking about it because it's dumb.
yeah.
You know, because it's and they were just, I can't remember what it was. It was something like Shivani fed them a line. And here's the thing, like if your gimmick is your gimmick, know your gimmick. Like
Right.
he fed them some sort of line, like they didn't know who like Rocky King was or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't Rocky King, but it was someone like that. It was like, oh, remember that time on Saturday night when you beat Rocky King? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, that 6'5" white dude, right? No, that's not who Rocky King
Giovanni's
is.
podcast eventually went to doing like commentaries to some of the old events, like comedic.
Yeah, yeah. The one that they did with Harley Cameron was they watched an episode of Glow.
Oh, okay.
But the problem is, like, it was playing, but they just talked about whatever.
Mm.
And occasionally they would say something about what was on the screen, but of course I had
Yeah,
no idea what they were talking about.
yeah. You kind of have to match up those commentaries and really.
Yeah. And as you know, I do listen to the Cornette Show and I listen to a few others. But yeah, now we're getting off on a tangent.
Well, yeah, but I'll just quickly say this was fascinating to listen to. I could see why it was canceled, not just for the reasons I mentioned, because I think mixing like the whole kayfabe part of it with these kind of behind the scenes things, it just doesn't flow very well because it's like you have to listen to a lot of like, okay, I know what's happening here to get to the good stuff. So while it was fascinating, I kind of get why it was short lived. But Leonard, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here?
No, I think we've pretty much gone over everything with it. I was very happy that at least one episode got unearthed and that
Yeah,
we listened to it. And I found it fascinating to listen to, and I would love to hear some more.
absolutely. I agree. Let us know what you thought of Radio WWF if you remember it, and comment however you see fit. And check out our other episodes as well. We're available wherever you listen to podcasts. And for Leonard, my name is Chad, and we will see you next time.